All right, everybody. Welcome to this live edition of the Compliance Guy. It is Thursday, March 24th, 2022. And as always, I want to say thank you to each and every single one of you tuning in, logging on, and just hanging out with me and my special guest. And, it's funny. My wife says to me, "Why do you say special guest? Aren't they all special? Because you have people on all the time." And yeah, they're all special. They're all special in their own way. But today, I'm going to tell Christine she's really special. And I'm joined by Christine Hall, um, auditor, coder, RCM extraordinaire,
Mm.
compliance guru of Sterling Global Solutions. And I'm excited to have Christine here for a lot of reasons. And we'll talk about those as the program continues. But as I said, I'm so grateful to each and every single one of you for hanging out with us for just a little while today. This week's been a little bit different than other weeks. We've actually had 2 live shows already, and we have our 3rd one tomorrow. Next week, I'm going to be out in Phoenix, Arizona at the HCCA 26th Annual Compliance Institute. I'm very fortunate I get an opportunity to present out there. If you're in Phoenix, I hope you'll join me. I'm presenting on Wednesday, the 30th at 12:15, session 708, which is building a risk-based auditing program. So with that said, I am joined by Christine Hall. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Sean. I've been
Oh,
a
it's my pleasure.
long time fan, first time attendee.
It's always funny when I have somebody say, "Oh, I've been a long time fan." I'm like, "What are you a fan of?" I'm just
Hmm.
some idiot sitting behind a computer with a I shouldn't say idiot. My company is going to get so mad at me for saying that. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. You know, I think we're going to have a lot of fun on this episode, and I think there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to be able to talk about and cover. Um, Usually, I have attorneys on like I did yesterday. I had 2 awesome attorneys on yesterday,
Yeah.
Jesse Witten and Steve Lokensgaard of, well, I'm not even going to try to say their company name because I keep messing up the first name for some reason. But, I always have attorneys on and we have to have these really serious conversations. And I think there's a lot of things that are not so serious that we can actually talk about to really engage with the coders, billers, and compliance professionals that are out there. And dare I say, some of the RCM folks that are
Hmm.
working out there. I have a whole lot of different things that I want to talk to you about because I think you and I have had some very parallel paths during our careers where we've had opportunities to both run and oversee billing companies. We
Hmm.
both have done a lot of auditing work and compliance and regulatory work. So again, I'm really grateful to have you here. We've had an opportunity to connect just before the show went live, and I know we were having some chuckles and some laughs and stuff. And uh, I'm sure we'll be able to bring some of that to the folks who are tuning in with us today. So, with that said, again, I'll say welcome to my very special guest, Christine Hall.
Thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate that.
All right.
Absolutely. It's been a wild ride and it still continues to be. One thing I really enjoy is trying to break down some of the complexities that we use in coding, billing, compliance. We make it sound like it's so serious, and truthfully, I think people don't realize that we're all normal, we're all doing this, we're all struggling. We all look at it the same kind of way, but then we listen to some of the attorneys or some of the true authorities in the area, and it makes it sound so serious. And truthfully, it's just us. It's what we do. It's we're out there, we're feeling it. So
Yeah, I would say not all of us are normal because anybody who works in compliance and auditing, there's something drastically wrong with us, right? There's just you got to have something wrong with you to want to continue to work in this field, given the extent of liability that we face as coders, as
mhm.
billers, as auditors, as compliance professionals. You know, um, and it's just getting more and more intense each and every single day. So, Um,
Well,
go ahead.
we're
Yeah.
definitely not normal. Anybody who gets excited when the final rule comes out and schedules a weekend that you're just going to hang out and read 24 pages of Federal Registry information, or, annually I sit down and look at the guidelines and I get super excited. I set up all my snacks and I set up all my drinks there, and I'm going to go in and read those guidelines again. And I truly get excited. So it does take a strange person to want to focus in on all of that, especially when it's, I'm not an attorney. It's not like I have to, but I love the knowledge that's out there. So we're definitely not a normal breed.
Yeah. I will tell you, you obviously have a pretty big fan base, Christine, because usually it's at least 30 minutes before somebody says anything on the messages, and they are all just blowing up. They're all like, "Hey, Christine, we love you. We love you." I like this one. This one's actually pretty fun. I get geeked on compliance topics. I,
Yeah.
I agree with you. You know, if somebody would have said to me 30 years ago, you're in 30 years from now, you're going to be having a severely receding hairline and you're going to get tremendous joy out of reading the Federal Register and reading, the CPT manuals and books on Stark law. Like now, my wife is like, "Hey, what are you reading?" And I said, "Oh, I'm reading the latest version of Stark law. That's what I'm reading." And my wife's like, "Is that like fiction or nonfiction? What is that?" And I'm like, "Stark law, like, where you have to be careful with your designated health services and you have to
Right.
have a pod of 5." And my wife looked at me and she goes, "I'm gonna go back to watching The Housewives." And that's
That's
the
funny
end of
that
that.
you say that. My husband likes to watch a lot of the reality shows, digging for gold in a pawn shop, or, racing a car down, to a yacht. I don't know, any of those reality shows he watches. And I love to spend time with my husband. So I live with the iPad or the laptop in front of me, reading my thing or doing my thing while we're watching, or while he's watching his thing. And it works out well that way. So we spend that time together, but I get to do my thing and he gets to do his thing. And
Hey, let me ask you before we get into all this.
yeah.
So you've been married for a long time.
Hmm.
Your kids are the same ages as mine and Jill's, right? Our oldest is
Hmm.
30. She's gonna be 31 on April 3rd if I allow her to make it to that.
I
And
understand
then
that.
our youngest is 26 with a boy who's 27. So a here's my question. This is so far off of the
It's okay. Go
conversation.
ahead.
Do you guys have just like long bouts of silence? Like, at
Who?
night
With the
when you're
kids?
watching no, 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 not the
Oh,
kids,
oh,
not the
oh.
kids. I'm
Yeah, they
talking
never
the
shut up.
I'm talking about, like, at night, you've
Hmm.
worked all day, you either get onto the couch or you get into the bed and the TV's on, and for, like, an hour, there's not, like, one word spoken between you guys. You're
Oh,
you're
that
either on.
happens.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
so
I'm
that's
stuck
normal.
in my world, and he's enjoying his. But I like the fact that we still take the time together, because somebody said that matters. And so we do. We take that time together, but yeah, it gets totally silent. He knows just enough to sound impressive. He can walk into a room and say ICD 10. But beyond that, he has no idea what it is. And so we make the best of it.
Yeah, I hear
But
you.
yeah.
Danielle, I think we're gonna have to have a therapy session at some point, because if you're reading through the Social Security Act for a few hours, I
Yeah.
good
I'm the
for
one
you.
who's going to need the therapy session. Who likes to sit and read that for hours and hours? But I
Well, I take
find
my hat off to him. So,
thanks. I
yeah.
appreciate that.
So here's the deal. Let's get serious now because,
Hmm.
my good friend Terry Fletcher,
Hmm.
she tells me I drive the bus off the road all the time, and if it's not for her yanking the wheel and pulling us back on our hashtag Terry Tuesdays, I'd be down in a ditch somewhere. So let me jump back on, and
Yeah, and I
um,
need to make a good impression for Terry too, because she's handed the torch over to me for this episode. I want to make sure I make her proud.
I know. You know, it's kind of funny. I watched Terry for the first time. She posts something and she's like, "Wow, I'm gone for 1 week and I'm already replaced." So, and I'll tell you this, it was actually really funny. Jordan Johnson, um,
Mhm.
one of my very, very good friends, he reached out to me and he goes, "Okay, so I'm trying to follow your strategy. We have a hashtag Terry Tuesday and now we have a Thursday Christine Hall." And I was like, "Hmm, hmm.
Thursday in the hall. I like
Er
that.
Oh, or how about a hall pass? How
Oh
about
my
hashtag?"
gosh.
Well, I gotta be careful with hall pass because not a lot of people know what that means and you can get into a lot
No.
of trouble. Did you see that movie, by the way, Hall Pass?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna spoil it for you. Go watch it, but I will tell you
Okay.
it's actually hysterical. It's got Vince Vaughn and it's got, Jason Sudeikis, and it's got,
Oh my gosh.
Owen Wilson. Go watch it, and you will quickly understand what the definition of a hall pass is. So I don't know that we can use that as our hashtag, but hey, maybe a good idea.
That's okay. I say, when we got the 22nd chapter in ICD-10, it's called the chapter for special purposes. And I am a person of a particular era where there was a lot of Steve Martin movies out, and Steve Martin played a character in a movie that talked about his special purpose. And so I have to remind people that that's not what chapter 22 in ICD-10 is about.
Right.
Um, so they'll have to find that movie and watch it to get that correlation. But
Ab
there's movies out there that make me think of other funny incidents.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Alright, so let's get serious and let's start
Okay.
talking about some of this stuff, right? So, one of the first things that I wanna talk about are the fact that we are still dealing with the 2021 Evaluation and Management Service changes. And
Yep.
that and I don't know if you're seeing it, maybe you are, maybe you're not, but we're seeing a lot of our clients reaching out to us and saying they are indicating that we failed our audit, and we're talking about maybe I'm just gonna say a commercial insurance company because
Hmm.
I don't wanna call out, any specific, payers. I'll do that a little bit later. Um, and I'll tell you a funny story about, what happened with one of those payers later on. So,
Okay.
anyways, what we've been seeing are clients coming to us and saying, "We failed this audit with this commercial insurance company," and then we start going through it and we see that the auditor from the commercial payer has indicated that for a 99203 or 99213, that the provider failed to document the appropriate number of elements of the history and the examination. Now, under 2021 guidelines, we
Hmm.
no longer have to count the beans.
Right.
Okay. It is now based on time or it is based on medical decision making, but both are in conjunction to medical necessity.
Right.
But we are seeing a lot of the payers right now auditing claims from 2021 and now I just had one from January of 2022 where they're coming back and they're saying the provider didn't substantiate the level of service because they failed to document the proper number of elements for the history or exam. Are you seeing any of that yourselves? And to our viewers, are any of you seeing that or dealing with that?
So I haven't seen that from the payer side just yet. I'm still doing the auditing, and I'm seeing it a little bit on the other side. So when I'm looking at providers' documentation, because the EMRs are still set up the way that they are, mhm, they're still documenting irrelevant history, irrelevant review of systems, reviewed the entire systems. Why? Why did they came in for a splinter? Why are we looking at all of the systems? So I still see that they're kind of stuck in that mode because they're driven by their EHRs. So I think,
Such
yeah,
a great point. Such a great point. And you know, when while you're talking about EHRs or EMRs, whatever you want to refer to them
right?
as, one of the things that I continue to be driven absolutely insane, one of the things,
Only one, Sean.
problem lists.
Oh my
Why
God.
do we have 30 problems on a problem list dating back to 1996?
Yep. That splinter I was talking about that you had in 96, why is it still on the problem list?
If something has resolved,
Hmm.
get it off your problem list But I've had doctors say to me, Sean, my coder told me that the more problems I have, the more diagnoses I have, the higher complexity of my decision making it is. And I said, well, here's a simple question for you. The otitis media that the patient had in 2003, did you actually address that today when they came in with chest palpitations? Well,
That's the
no.
word.
Yeah.
That's the word, addressed. Yeah, and they
And
don't.
why is it still on the problem list? Folks, clean up your problem lists. It does nothing but convolute your documentation. For me, and I'm guessing you probably feel the same way. I don't want to speak for you, but for me, the worst day in healthcare was the day that providers were forced to move to electronic health records.
Well, I have mixed feelings about that. I'm going to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah,
I like it for the fact that it made things easier to read, easier to understand, but then it also gave us fillers in the medical record. So a 19-page medical record and you still don't know why the patient was there.
that's right.
Patient
That's
presents to
my
the
thing.
office. Okay, for what? You examine them head to toe, and then at the very bottom, you have a diagnosis of hypertension.
Well,
No.
I'll make you laugh. I had a court case a couple of years ago, and on so and when I say the worst day for me was the mandate of the EMRs, it's not that I have anything against EMR companies. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's what it forces physicians to do. It forces them to take shortcuts. It forces them to cut and paste, carry forward, clone. Okay. But I had a case where there were probably 20 dates of service. Excuse me. And
Mm-hmm.
every one of them under the chief complaint said, F you.
Oh, I hate that. I
Well,
say that in every time I educate. I tell them that's not very nice.
so the judge looked at me and said, Mr. Weiss, I have a question for you. And obviously, judges at any point when you're a testifying expert can
Mm-hmm.
ask you questions or clarifications. He said, Mr. Weiss, I have a question for you. And I said, sure. He goes, can you tell me what FU means?
I knew you were going to say that.
It's God's honest truth. And I said, as long as you promise not to throw me out of here, I'll tell you. And he just kind of, he and the jury kind of chuckled about it. And then he got very serious and he said, no, seriously, what does it mean? And I said, it means follow up. And he goes, well, follow up of what? And I said, that's a great question.
I say the same thing all the time. Your
Yeah,
golf game that you or the conversation you had passing in church or follow up of what? Could be
that's right.
anything.
That's right. So, while we're on this, Betty, I agree with you, Betty. Look at the new MDM table, the verbiage, number and complexity of problems addressed, right? But it's addressed. Notice the key word in there, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
Christine pointed out as well. It goes back to that problem list of 30 where 99% of those things have resolved, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's what has been addressed, and I agree with you. Making sure that they understand the coding conventions for
Yeah.
diagnosis codes, so critical, so critical. Um,
Well, I
Go ahead, please.
preach the guidelines. Anyone who has ever, been an instructor for many years, they start the class and I say, you want to know what the trick is of passing this class? Read the guidelines. By the time week 16 comes rolling around, I ask the class, did anybody read the guidelines? Well, it's kind of like stereo instructions or IKEA furniture instructions. It's just, I didn't, I said, what, but listen, that's the key to all of this. Read it paragraph by paragraph. It's going to tell you what to do. You don't need to be putting all this brain power in it. It's right there in black and white.
Yep.
Um, and the new instructions that came out for CPT every year, I get so excited. I know I'm going to talk about geeking again, but I get so excited because now they're adding more and more explanation. There was more definition. And I think because people get on that hamster wheel of this is my job, I got to go in every day, post the charges, get the payments out, get they have a role they've got to do, that they lose the fact that they need to be keeping up with what's going on.
Yeah.
A good audit not only points out your risks, but a good audit points out opportunities that you're missing.
Yeah. Now you brought up a term, guidelines,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to attack that. Wow, you're doing really good. You're driving. See, I tell people all the time, I'm the bus driver, you're the navigator. I'm going to go wherever you want to go. Okay. So
Okay.
you're taking me down this road.
Okay.
Yesterday, I had, as I said, Jesse Witten and Steve Lokensgaard on. And one of the things that we were talking about are guidelines. Now, remember, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you. Guidelines are important.
Mm-hmm.
Local coverage determinations are important, right? Because they tend to set policy.
And they
But
guide.
and they
Mm-hmm.
guide. Okay. But guidelines are just that. They're
Guides.
guidelines. They're not absolute.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I want to make sure everybody who's listening to us today understands. Local coverage determinations in and of themselves are not law.
Mm-mm.
Please do not take an LCD to mean that is the law. The only way that an LCD becomes law is if it is actually put through a formal rule making process, meaning it
Mm-hmm.
has to be promulgated into the law. There is a huge Supreme Court case called Alina, and the judge in the Alina case actually came out and said, absolutely not. You can't take a local coverage
Mm-hmm.
determination, stick it into the Federal Register without it going through a comment period and a formal rulemaking process and tell people that it's law. It is not. Be careful. Now, I'm not telling you don't follow the LCDs. That's not what I'm
Right.
saying at all.
No, I know. I know.
Yeah,
I say use them as a rule of thumb. That's not a
perfect.
bad place to collect yourself and put a policy, internal policy and procedure in place using those LCDs as the rule of thumb. But that doesn't mean that that's law. It doesn't
Yep,
mean that that's going to be absolution.
that's right. That's right. So, what is actually a law is a national coverage determination, an
Mm-hmm.
NCD. An NCD is produced by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services out of Baltimore. The
Mm-hmm.
LCDs, which is why you tend to find a lot of variation from MAC to MAC, LCDs are created at the regional level, at the local level. So while you may find, for example, a pain injection,
Mm-hmm.
for, spinal injections,
Mm-hmm.
one MAC may say on a rolling 12 months, you can only do 4 of those. But you may find another MAC who doesn't even put a condition
Right.
on that. So be careful. Be careful on what you actually send to a provider when you say, this is the law. Now, a lot of
Yeah.
people may not realize this because everybody thinks of me as like health law, compliance, and stuff. I'm still a coder at heart. I cut my teeth in coding. I got my certification back in 1997, somewhere around there, a long time ago. But um, I will tell you, it's like the AMA. I have people say to me all the time, but Sean, the AMA says, okay, nothing against the AMA, but tell me the last time any of you submitted a claim to the American Medical Association for reimbursement.
Right.
Okay.
Not a payer,
Yep.
not part of your agreement. You don't make an agreement with the AMA.
That's
You make
right.
an agreement with a payer
That's
that
right.
you're going to follow their rules.
That's right. So I want to actually pull up a couple of things real quick before we move on, because these folks, we got some awesome people on here today. Okay. So unspecified chest pain for 2 to 3 years by a cardiologist. Is that not questionable? Absolutely it's questionable, right? I agree with you. In that period of time, they need to find a more specific diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it can, whatever it is, it could be tied to hypertensive heart disease. It could be tied to whatever. It may not even be a cardiac condition at all. It could be something tied to the gastrointestinal problems that the individual's having. Great comment. Great question. This one here, let me get your take on this. I ran into that
Okay.
one. Education. Um, Give me a second here. This one here. Let's get your take on this one. What's your take on providers documenting history of on an active problem?
So when I see something that I know there's no cure for, COPD, a history of COPD. I tend to go back and query the provider. I like to go back and educate them. Let's stop this. Don't use history anymore unless you've come up with a cure for COPD. And if you have, please share it with the rest of the world because we're waiting. COPD is not a history of. I think providers in medical school, they're taught history of to mean something else than what it means on the payer side. And because they don't teach the business of medicine in a normal medical school course,
Right.
that leaves them at a disadvantage because they don't understand that when they say history of, from a payer's perspective, it means a resolved issue there. So now we're going back and forth. We are simply coders trying to educate a physician who went to Yale, Harvard, University with those professors that are vetted. Those professors said use history of, but on the payer side, we're looking at it from a different perspective. So there's always that conflict I find with providers that I have to go back and re-educate from the payer's perspective. We're not looking at it clinically. Sorry, there's a disconnect between clinical and a payer, but from a payer's perspective, that's resolved. So let's just make sure that we only use the history of in those resolved cases, and that we use the active diagnosis when we're talking about those active conditions like COPD.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll get to some more of the questions and comments in just a few minutes. I want to kind of transition over to what are you at Sterling Global? What are you all seeing as some of the audit targets that your clients are dealing with, either from the Office of Inspector General, from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or from the commercial payers themselves?
So one of the biggest things that we're seeing, I work with a very large dermatology group down here in South Florida. Go figure. Um, and the funny thing is that we're seeing those audits or those requests coming over for issues that we were told they were going to be looking for. If you go to the work plan, they call out dermatologists specifically for overutilization of modifier 25. And
Ah,
for as much as I have tried to educate, providers are still fighting that. I'm still having a lot of discussion with them about modifier 25. And the biggest thing, again, it always goes back to, but this is what I learned in medical school. Okay. But I'm telling you that I looked at the OIG and I'm telling you that you've got a letter that has come in. You have a documentation request from a payer, and it's about the exact same thing that they told us they were going to be looking at. So that's one of the big things that I'm seeing right now, or that I'm dealing with right now, is we have an audit, of course, that's come through on modifier 25 in dermatology, but we knew that this was coming. Payers also follow the OIG, they follow RAC, they follow the other people in the industry that have identified problems. And I think that's one thing that payers don't realize is we know they're coming. We know what they're coming for. We know what they're concerned with. And one more thing, by reading the Federal Registry, you kind of get an idea of some of their concerns when they answer comments back. And that final rule, they're answering why they're not doing something. What have they seen in the past? What is their rationale? And I think we should pay attention to that because they're telling us what they're going to see. And then lo and behold, the documentation requests start coming in.
one of
So,
the things that I like to encourage internal coders, internal auditors, for whether you're a solo practitioner or you're part of an integrated delivery health system with 5,000 providers, it doesn't
mhm.
matter. What I like
Oops, sorry,
to That's okay.
my alarm went off.
That's okay. Was that your alarm to say I have to go?
No,
Oh,
not at
okay.
all.
Because I'm having fun so far.
I'm having a great time too. No. I'm trying to be a compliant patient. So I
Ah,
set alarms when I'm a lady of a particular age, Sean. Come on. I have to set alarms to remind me to do important things. So,
you know, do you ever find yourself setting alarms to do something and then you're like, it goes off and you just clear it and you're like, I'll get to that in a minute. And like 4 hours later, you're
and
like,
it never
oh my God,
happens.
I never did that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
every day.
and see, now we got off track and I don't even know. Oh, we were talking about the modifier 25, right?
hmm
I think we should all be grateful to every single provider who continues to misuse and misinterpret the modifier 25 because it's job security.
Absolutely.
So I want to share with y'all. Yeah, I want to share with you all. I have a case, and I got to be very careful because every AUSA in the country that I have a case pending will watch these, or they'll have one of their folks watch these to see if I say something. So I want to be very careful.
Mm-hmm.
But I recently ran into a situation where an AUSA actually said there's no such thing as the modifier 25. It doesn't exist. It's made up. You can never have an evaluation and management service on the same day as a surgical procedure. And period. That was it. There was no changing this AUSA's mind.
What gave them that impression?
Well, they have a quote unquote coding expert that they happen to work with. And the coding expert said to them, oh, none of the payers recognize modifier 25 anymore. They automatically remove it from every single claim. So it doesn't count.
When was the last time that they saw an adjudicated claim with modifier 25? Because I see them all day long.
Yeah, folks, here's what I want to tell you. Okay. Please listen to me, because this is what I do every single day. AUSAs have to deal with a number of different types of crimes, a number of different types of issues on a day in and day out basis. Okay. And none of them are extreme experts in healthcare. I think the majority of AUSAs that see something come across their desk tied to healthcare probably go, oh God. Healthcare is the most complex of any industry that I know of. We have more rules, more regulations than any other industry, I think, besides nuclear. But Jordan Johnson brings up about the modifier 25. He says in oncology, the modifier 25 is for a separate an unrelated disease or issue from the primary diagnosis. So keep in mind, and Jordan, I don't disagree with you, but keep in mind that both the American Medical Association and, more importantly, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services have come out and said, you do not have to have a separate diagnosis code in order to use the modifier 25. You just need to be able to demonstrate that you have a significantly separately identifiable evaluation and management service above and beyond the pre-service workup of that minor procedure. So let me ask, well, I'm going to stay away from that, Christine, because that will get too specific and I'll probably get in trouble with the judge. What other big issues are you seeing right now that our viewers need to be aware of?
Telehealth. Telehealth is one of those areas. I love telehealth. I'm a fan of telehealth way before it was cool. And, but I am seeing a lot of payers now looking at telehealth, especially those visits that happened in 2020, 2021, because the rules were changing almost every day during that time. I remember in 2020 putting out a presentation and within a week having to go and write an addendum to it because they had changed something significant. So telehealth is another one of those areas that I'm seeing a lot of action happening.
Yeah, telehealth, my good friend, Terry Fletcher, I think she should just change her middle name to telehealth because she, and I mean that sincerely.
No, I agree. She's in California and they have been the leaders of telehealth for decades now.
California, you had to go there, huh?
Sorry.
California. I'm just going to keep moving on. Okay.
I'm not saying that they were doing it right or doing it wrong. I just say they've been doing it for a long time.
Look, here's what I'll say about telehealth. Okay. Telehealth played a critical role during the pandemic. And what's really interesting is if you take a look at some of the numbers that are out there from beneficiaries that used telehealth for the very first time or used it during the pandemic, I believe the number was 78 or 79% of those individuals said they will continue to use telehealth services because it was convenient.
Mm-hmm.
It was on their time. They didn't have to show up to an office and wait an hour because the provider was running behind or what have you. But here's the thing. I
Mm-hmm.
think telehealth has its limitations. And I will
Absolutely.
yeah. And I will
Yeah.
tell you, this is one of the biggest audit targets, not only for the Office of Inspector General, but for all payers
Mm-hmm.
coming out of that pandemic. And I
Oh yeah.
expect to see a lot of big cases coming down the pike. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what I will say is, for me, where I believe um, telehealth is so critical is in behavioral health, in
Oh
psychiatric
yeah.
services.
Yeah.
So critical.
Yeah.
Um, I honestly believe that if we invest correctly as an industry and EHR vendors, telehealth vendors, they invest appropriately, they could build some incredible platforms for patients to be able to not only get critical information to help them
Mm-hmm.
with the dosing of their medications, to understand contraindications of medications, to understand what they should expect, when they should expect those changes, so on and so forth. But also, I love telehealth for behavioral health services because it really gives that added layer of protection for the patient, that sense of security
Yes.
that I'm in my safe environment
Yeah.
and I know. So we
Well,
got
that's
Danielle.
that's.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
please go ahead. No,
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 that
no.
that
Go
just
ahead.
reminds me that one of the mental health providers I was talking to says that one of the challenges with people having to come to an office is during a mental health session, you open up some very intimate, dark places and people, and then you send them off into the world. When you have telemental health, you're able to open this person up in the comfort of their home, in the security of their environment. And then when you leave them, they have a safe place to kind of put themselves back together. And that was one of the biggest things that resonated to me is if you have, if you're pouring your heart out to somebody and okay, time's up, put it all back, now get on the street, drive down the road and go back to work or that's difficult. That's very difficult. I think we're going to see better outcomes of mental health as we start using telemental health and making it easier for people to reach out, privacy of reaching out. It's no longer, oh, I have a doctor's appointment. Well, where are you going?
Right.
No, it's private. You can go in your car, you could go in your home, you can go into a small and intimate place that you don't feel who's watching me walk into the psychiatrist's office or it's been incredible what we've seen.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, I lost my brother in 2003 to suicide.
Oh, I'm
And
so
I
sorry.
honestly believe that had in place in 2003 telehealth services in the mental health arena, like what we are shifting
Hmm.
towards and what
Hmm.
we have seen providers really do an excellent job of during the pandemic. I honestly believe my brother would possibly still be with us today because, he didn't want to go to a doctor's office and run the risk of running into other people and potentially knowing people or being judged or what have you, with people seeing him walking into a mental health provider's office. Now,
Right.
obviously his issues went somewhat deeper than that. But at the same time, I honestly believe providers need to continue to invest in telehealth for mental health services because I really believe that is one of a couple of specialties that is going to absolutely flourish in the
Hmm.
telehealth world as we continue to move forward. So,
And also it's going to give
yeah,
an opportunity. We talk about physician burnout so much. I think with telemental health, you're going to have more clinical providers that feel comfortable reaching out to a mental health provider to talk about the struggles of the day. Surgeons that lose patients, or even those psychiatrists, they take all of that in. Sometimes they choose not to seek that type of mental health therapy because, well, I'm a doctor. How is that going to look if I am? So telemental health creates some some anonymity, I can't remember the word.
Anonymity.
Thank you.
Anonymity.
Anonymity. Yeah, that. So that could encourage providers to reach out. I lost a psychiatrist friend of mine to suicide a few years ago, and the only thing that I could think is the weight that provider had, and how are you going to call your colleague on the phone and say, no, I'm not referring a patient, I'm referring myself.
That's right.
That's a hard situation. So I hope that we're going to be able to see that telemental health helps providers and provider burnout as well.
Yep. Absolutely. Well said. All right. I'm going to take this one down because I have seen a lot of people actually commenting on this one, and I love the fact that you all are collaborating with each other. So I'm going to leave that one alone. And see, I started to say something before, whether you're a solo practice or you're an integrated, and I never finished my thought, right? Because remember,
Mhm.
we started talking. Your alarm went off, and see what happens.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
I'm easily distracted. I'm a
I
man.
say that all the time when I'm presenting. Please mute yourself, because if you are doing something fun, I'm going to want to listen to that instead.
Well, I'm a man, and a lot of times I have a hard time multitasking things, especially, because I'm like, "Ooh, bright colors, noise. Wait, what is that?" So let me let me go back to what I was going to say,
Okay.
and so coders, auditors, compliance professionals, irrespective of whether you're a solo practice or you're a multidisciplinary health system, hospital network, whatever you are, I I really think that creating an annual audit elements guide is so critical. What am I talking about? In Q4 of each year,
Hmm.
because we no longer have to wait for the OIG at the end of each year to come out with what their work plan is for the next year. We get it now
Right.
monthly. In quarter 4, we should take any elements from the OIG, or we should take any ongoing issues that we've had with commercial payers or Medicare, and we
Hmm.
should create a audit elements guide that basically says evaluation and management services, pull 5 to 20 charts, quarterly,
Right.
annually,
Hmm.
whatever it is. Error rates greater than 20% will require a re-review within 30 days.
Hmm.
Education with the internal coder. Um, I
The
actually create
compliance program for the year.
That's right.
Yeah.
I actually created an audit elements guide. I will, when I post this tomorrow, once we do the podcast version of this, which is
Hmm.
just the audio, I will put that audit elements guide on there as well. And I don't know if LinkedIn will allow me to do it as a Word document where you can manipulate it, but this is
Mm.
something that I've actually built for clients. And this is something that you can take and actually manipulate for your specific practice. I,
Hmm.
I, I thought this was really actually kind of funny. Ooh, a very pretty flower.
And then
All right, so let's see.
it took me
But one,
years to say specificity. I'm not
yeah.
going to lie. It took me years to say that clearly.
So
Specificity.
yeah, so I'm from South Georgia, and we actually tend to make up our own words down here. So that kind of works out nice for me. All right. So what other elements are you seeing as high value targets for your clients?
So I'm also seeing annual wellness visits. That's one
Okay.
of the areas that I think we just keep missing it. We miss the mark. I blame the EMRs, the EHRs. I'm going to tell you that because most of them don't come with a template. And so providers that are now indoctrinated to using a template for everything, they don't have that annual wellness template built in. So they are missing all of those mandatory requirements of it because they're just filling it out as if it were a regular office visit and missing the mark. So that's another area that I see a lot from a Medicare perspective. That's where a lot of the target probe and educates that I've worked on, a lot of the audits that are coming in, or ADRs that are coming in for annual wellness visits.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I was actually pulling up um, a document that I want to share. It's the one. that we were just talking about a few moments ago.
Okay.
And this is the audit elements table. Let me see if I can figure out how to share. There we go. There we go. Technology sometimes eludes me, but here we go. All right. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
All right. Let me blow it up a little bit more for people who are struggling with their vision like I am. So this is one that I created in 2021 that kind of leads into, and it's really interesting because somebody was talking about this here, where they actually said my previous health system required 90% pass rate on ICD 10 and levels of service. So I think a 10% error rate or less is great because remember, if you're under a CIA, a corporate
Hmm.
integrity agreement with
Hmm.
the Office of Inspector General, you have to have at or below a 5% error rate in order to be able to not be out of compliance.
Right. Or
Um,
have that overpayment per quarter.
yeah. So this is something just to give you an idea of what I've created, and this is what I'll share with everybody. Like
I
for an
love
example,
this.
yeah. So like I said, here we go. So this is an evaluation and management coding documentation. It could either I like retrospective reviews, and the reason why I like retrospective reviews is for the simple fact that um, we have to deal with Medicare's 60-day rule. And if we're
Right.
doing, I have a lot of clients that say to me, well, I only want to do prospective reviews. Well, if you have a high or sustained error rate on a prospective review, you have an obligation under the civil monetary penalties law to go back 6 years
Hmm.
to understand how widespread or systemic your problem is. So in this case, we're looking at retrospective baseline reviews for new providers, 10 office encounters, 10 new patient encounters, and 10 established patient encounters, right? That's the breakdown. We say all chart reviews are performed retrospectively unless otherwise identified. E&M chart reviews will be performed. Now, this is for anything outside of 99202 through 99215. Keep that in mind.
Hmm.
This
Right.
this particular client here was heavy in hospital, which is why I was using the 95 and 97. And then you see here, here's our remedies. And if it's greater than 10% error rate, we refer to the coding and audit escalation policy. And then we have a passing error rate. And then you could go through here and you could take a look. We're going to do accuracy of diagnosis
Hmm.
codes for your ICD 10. So they're on your list. Um, Medical necessity. This is a code that is often overlooked.
Yeah.
99211. Folks, only the 99201 went away. The
Right.
99211 is still in play. Okay. Um,
And it's so much easier to use now because they took out all of that verbiage. Even in the last update we had for 22, they took out the presenting problem. So now it's just a little naked code out there. No expectation, no MDM, no time, no problem.
yep.
So it is
And
it is very underutilized.
yep. Oh, of course. See, I start touching things and I mess it all up. Okay.
This is usually what I do on the other side. I usually have all of this information in my report of findings, and my recommendation is exactly what you have there. Anybody less than 10%, we need to do a focus. Another, re-educate, then do a focus. Check out how they're doing. Re-educate, focus. Um, Continuing this route.
Yeah. So look at this right here. This is incident two. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Incident two, I'm just going to say it. Don't do it.
Really, I love
Yeah.
incident
But
too.
let me explain to you why. Okay.
Okay.
Well, if you love incident two, then we need to get you on a telehealth therapy conference. Okay.
Probably.
Let me tell
When
you
it's
why.
when it's reported properly, when it's utilized the right way, when I don't have to babysit incident two, I
Yeah,
love
that never
incident two.
happens.
Yeah,
That never
well,
happens. So let me just say the risk reward is just not there. Okay. I have too many times where we do a review or I have an audit. I just got done with one from the Office of Inspector General.
hmm.
And even though the provider had the rendering as the nurse practitioner, for whatever reason, the provider's practice had their PMS set as a default to bill under the supervising physician. Well, the problem
No.
is the
Yeah.
supervising physician wasn't even in the practice. But what about the situations where a patient presents with a new problem or
Hmm.
an exacerbation to an existing problem?
Mm-hmm.
This is no longer an
Nope.
incident to service.
Correct.
So that's why I tell people all the time, please stay away from incident to services. The risk reward just is not there, in my humble opinion. Um, now, there is another document that I wanted to share. If y'all oblige me for just a moment. Um, Let me see.
When I think of
Go ahead,
incident
please.
two, Sean, while you're looking for that document, when I think of incident two, I think that if we educate the practice correctly and maybe designate a day of the week that the nurse practitioner physician assistant does follow-up visits. And then on that day of the week, all they have to realize is if it's exacerbated or new, it's not incident two. But if you separate it out so that Tuesday, maybe Tuesday, Thursday is follow up day for the nurse practitioner, then they have one guide to follow. It gets confusing when you're doing it every day of the week, all the patients, there's no order, no structure. So, again, having a plan in place of when it's going to be a good opportunity to do it and minimize the risk by saying only Tuesdays or only Tuesday, Thursday, we do incident two follow up visits. Anything new, anything exacerbated, it's not incident two. That makes it a little easier and it allows you to collect that additional 15% on the days that we're only doing follow ups. Take the confusion out.
It does. And I don't want to poo poo anything that you're saying because I like you. I do.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
really do like you. So I don't want to poo poo anything that you're saying. But I will tell you, the first recommendation that I make to any group that's doing incident two, one, you need to go and you need to do an audit of your services that are being billed as
Mhm.
incident to billing provisions, because I think you're going to find
They
that
do it
you
wrong.
probably have a lot of problems. Okay. Um, Second, look at what the risk reward is. Go take a look at the number of cases just within the last, I don't know, 2 years of all of the settlement agreements that
Oh,
had to
yeah.
be put in place with the Office of Inspector General, settlement agreements with the Department of Justice,
Justice.
and
Yeah.
all of these entities. And you're quickly going to find where these problems are. Now, I want to share with you because you probably saw it in the previous document that I shared with you, and I'll make this available. All right, so this is a policy that I've actually written, and this deals with audit escalation. So in the event you have one of your providers who fails to behave the way that they're supposed to, okay?
Hmm.
This actually is an audit escalation policy. And what this does is it provides and it talks about, those items that constitute an error. So we need to
Hmm.
understand what constitutes an error first, okay?
And I
Then
like
we
that you're using the word error
That's right.
because,
I don't care what your accuracy rate is.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, then we have sliding scales, and I've broken these down for you by the 80 to 90%, 70 to 79%, 60 to 69%, and those falling below 60. And then we've talked about how to utilize statistical sampling.
Hmm.
When is it appropriate? What section of the Medicare Program Integrity Manual should you be utilizing for this? What does the Office of Compliance or outside counsel, how do they get involved? What's the compliance officer's responsibility? But what about financial remedies
Right.
against providers who are employees of an organization? What rights does an organization have to be able to go back and recoup against a provider who is a bad actor in the organization? So I will, when I post the other document, I will go ahead and I will include this with it as well, because I don't think that one is necessarily going to paint a complete picture for you
Well,
without
I
the
know
other.
one of our listeners right now is probably jumping up and down because she has been fighting with a particular provider that this would be awesome to escalate through the compliance chain there. And I love that. I love that you have that in place. Um, it makes me nervous when I walk into a practice and they say, where's your compliance program? Can I take a look at where you're at in your compliance program? And they immediately go and grab that book that they've got to blow the dust off of. And I think, ugh,
Yeah. Well,
you're not helping yourself. That this is this is like never going to the dentist or never getting a checkup and then you suddenly die of cancer and think, oh, gee, how did that happen? Well, you have to be taking care of yourself. You have to be taking care of your practice. You have to be looking at areas that you could have risk. And then what do you do when you identify it?
That's
That's so awesome because I don't think that enough practices do that.
Yeah. No, you're right. And the thing that I hear all the time is, oh, it costs too much money to do this, or it's too time consuming. Folks, here's the deal. One way or another, you're going to pay for it. You're either going to pay a little up front or you're going to pay a whole bunch on the back end.
Yeah.
Take your pick. It's up to you. But yeah, this is what I do on a day in and day out basis. I create policies and procedures and tools and templates and all kinds of things because I just have nothing better to do in my life. So that's what I do. So, all right. So let's talk about our final topic of the day.
Okay.
And I want to get your take on this. Coder liability. Okay.
I hear that a lot.
Yep. One of the things that I try to explain to coders all the time is that you are not a physician. You are not a nurse practitioner. You're not a PA. Okay. Please don't get upset or offended. I have a CPC just like the rest of you. Okay. But you're not a physician. Just because you had to take a basic course on anatomy and a basic course on medical terminology does not make you a clinician. Just because you stayed in a Holiday Inn Express does not make you a clinician. When you go back and you argue with a provider,
you just dated yourself, Sean, with that commercial.
I'm old. One only has to look at this mop on my face. I probably should shave at some point soon. So, here's the deal. Don't try to argue medical necessity from a clinical judgment standpoint with a provider. You're never going to win. That is not your job as a coder. Your job as a coder is to take what a provider gives you, and your job is to use the coding guidelines, the policy guidelines, right? LCDs, LCAs, and then go back and educate your providers if they are out of compliance with a policy. That's right, Kimberly. Stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. I like that. A Kimberlyism. I don't have any Shawneeisms. I probably should find a couple.
She has lots of Kimberlyisms.
I bet she does. Yeah. She's awesome. I love Kimberly. So here's the deal. Look, I don't like when coders automatically start changing the codes that a provider has selected, because now I believe that creates a liability situation for you as the coder. Because at the end of the day, remember, the CMS 1500 form provides an attestation.
Yes.
Which says, I, the treating provider, attest to the fact that all information on this claim form is accurate to the best of my knowledge. If you start changing levels of service, either increasing it or decreasing it, you run a significant risk of being pointed to during an audit or an investigation, because physicians are human and physicians are going to say, wait a minute now, AUSA, I'm a physician. I hired Christine and Kimberly and Beth and Alexis and all of these other people, right? They all have CPCs and they have advanced coding credentials and auditing credentials. I hired them. I understand, stupidity is not a defense, and they're right, because it's not, because under the law, they get prosecuted for knowingly, which includes reckless disregard or deliberate ignorance.
I love those terms.
Yeah, what I call ostrich head in the sand syndrome. Okay? You can't do that.
Right.
But when you start changing levels of service, or you start changing the integrity of what it is that a provider selected as a procedure, a surgical intervention, you now bear that responsibility. What are your thoughts about that?
My thought is that the coder our job is to be the interpreter. We take what they write and we interpret it into the correct code. If for any reason what they write doesn't represent the same code that we feel it should be, that's where we go and query. We ask questions. We're just an interpreter. We cannot put our own interpretation into it because, like you said, we're not clinicians. Another thing that I look at is we don't know if there was something else that the provider took into account that maybe they didn't document. We don't know what their thinking was. We don't know where their mind was. We need to go back and ask them questions so that they can edify their documentation to include those things that would have linked us to the correct translation or the correct code, I should say. So that's what my interpretation is. And I always tell coders, if you don't think that the right code has been properly documented, you need to go back and get that in writing. Never
Yep.
that it is your opinion as a coder, because you're not, you hit it on the head. We're not clinicians.
That's right.
We're not supposed to know what that process, that mind process, or that plan of care for that patient is supposed to be.
Yep.
We're just there to interpret and then maybe ask questions that they can add a little more information for clarity to support that interpretation. But that's it.
Absolutely.
That's our role.
Well said. Now, LinkedIn user, I'm not sure if this is the same LinkedIn user from the other day who actually works for the Unified Program Integrity Contractor. If you are, it's good to see you again. If you're not and you're somebody else, I'm glad to see you.
Nice
But
to meet you.
yeah, they're right. Coders, when you start changing the codes that a provider put on there and you're billing these things, you are essentially using the NPI number of that provider, which now puts you on the hook. And there was something that passed the other day, and we're gonna wrap it up here with Medicaid. They have now passed under Medicaid. If you overbill Medicaid, it is no longer just an overpayment situation. It is now a chargeable offense under a separate statute for identity theft.
Oh, I heard that.
Yeah, I did a whole post on it the other day. So,
Yeah.
yes,
Maybe that's what I heard, but I
it,
heard about that.
yep, it's identity theft because you are using the benefits of an individual under a false pretense.
Mhm.
That's what they're, and it carries a minimum mandatory sentence of 2 years. So be careful. All right, last question, and then we're gonna wrap this sucker up. What to do
Hi,
if the
Raina.
provide?
Sorry, I know Raina. I haven't seen her in a long time. How you
There you
doing?
go. What to do if the provider denies the charge of CPT code that does not support his or her documentation? What to do if the provider denies the charge of CPT code that does not support?
So if you go back to the provider and you make the recommendation that your documentation as documented doesn't support the 99215, and the provider says, bill it anyway, I'm the doctor. Is that what you're trying to say, Rana?
I think so.
Okay. So my advice to you is if you've talked to the provider and we're hitting a brick wall, go the next level of communication. Talk to your supervisor, talk to your administrator. If you're not getting any success there, reach out to the compliance officer or the compliance committee there so that you are sharing this information, you're communicating this information over to the people who do have that authority.
Absolutely. And I was correct. That was our friend from the Unified Program Integrity Contractor. So I'm glad to have you back with us again today. And this individual, I agree as well. You also need to be careful when we query the provider as to not lead into a code solely for reimbursement purposes. Could not agree with you more. We
Right.
want to ensure that what is being billed is done based on what was documented during the encounter, and that during an audit, we're able to substantiate that level of service with that for that provider's date of service. So we have actually exceeded our 1 hour podcast. We usually don't go beyond an hour. Usually I try to go 30 minutes or 45 minutes, but
I
this was
have
a
been accused of being a little long winded from time to time, so I'm not really surprised.
well, here's what I'll say. Um, I'm glad that we did because we had an incredible viewership. We had an incredible amount of interaction and questions. And I don't know about you, but I'm so grateful for everybody who's joined in with us today. It made it you know what, Christine, you really are a special guest.
Oh, thanks.
And to each and every single one of y'all who joined in today, I can't tell you how much it means to have you as part of this live episode. Again, if you're not following me on LinkedIn, please do. I post on a daily basis. I'm always blogging about health law, regulatory compliance, coding, billing, auditing issues. I love getting feedback and engaging with all of you out there. A couple of weeks ago, I did a week of OIG compliance where each and every single day I tackled a different OIG target, dealing with non-monetary gifts, dealing with incident 2, dealing with all kinds of fun stuff. So again, if you're not following, please go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn. You could follow me on YouTube or one of the other social media platforms. It's so great to have you with us. Again, to you, Christine Hall, thank you so much for taking so much time out of your busy schedule and hanging out with me on this
Anytime,
episode.
Sean. Anytime.
I think we're going to have to do this again.
I hope so. This was fun.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
then just be prepared because I will be reaching out, and don't screen my calls.
I don't. I picked up when you called yesterday.
You did. You
Right.
did pick up. I was usually people see my phone number and they're like, "Oh God." And I know it goes right to voicemail. So you did pick up. So that
Yeah.
you get a star for that one. So again, folks, thanks for tuning in, logging on, and just hanging out with us today for a little while. Again, remember, be good to yourself, but more importantly, be good to each other. And until next time, take care.
Thanks, Sean.